I didn't even make it home that night. One minute I was driving back from my family's Easter party, headlights stretching across the wet highway, and the next, a semi-truck slammed into the side of my Jeep and folded the steel like paper. I remember the roof crushing down. I remember tasting blood. I remember someone screaming, "We're losing her, move!" And then everything went dark. The next thing I knew, I was on a gurney under white hospital lights, half conscious while voices overlapped around me. Pelvis shattered. BP dropping. "We need consent now," call her mother. Now. Someone grabbed my phone. Someone pressed FaceTime. And suddenly, my mother's face appeared. Not scared. Not crying. Not rushing to get to me. She was lying in a spa chair. Sheet mask on. Cucumber slices on her eyes. My little sister Haven beside her, scrolling her phone. The nurse turned the camera toward my blood-soaked face. "Mrs. Carver, your daughter has been in a severe accident. She needs emergency surgery to stay alive." My mom didn't gasp. Didn't move. Didn't sit up. She sighed. Annoyed. "If she doesn't pull through, just let me know later," she said. "I'm not signing anything right now. We're in the middle of a treatment. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you believe in karma, hit like and subscribe, because the next things my mother said still make doctors shake their heads." The nurse tried again. "Ma'am, she will not survive without surgery." "I heard you," my mom cut in. "Call my father. He likes that kid more than I do." Then she hung up. The spa music kept playing through the phone for 2 seconds before the screen went black. A resident dropped an instrument. Another whispered, "Record that. That's medical neglect." The surgeon swore under his breath and barked at the nurses to call the next emergency contact. My world faded again. I didn't wake for 18 days. But I know everything that happened because the hospital told me later. The next call went to my grandpa, Clarence Brooks, retired police chief. The only person on earth who ever came when he said he would. He answered on the first ring. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't wait for details. He grabbed his keys and drove through a thunderstorm like the highway belonged to him. 16 minutes later, he burst through the ER doors wearing rubber boots and an apron still stained from cleaning shrimp. "Where is she?" "Take me to her, now." They tried to explain the paperwork. He didn't need explanations. He signed everything shoved at him. Hands shaking. Signature barely legible. "Do whatever you have to do," he said. "Just save my girl." They opened me up minutes later. 9 hours of surgery. Blood transfusions. Monitors screaming. Doctors fighting the clock. Grandpa sat in a metal chair outside the operating room the entire time. He didn't eat. Didn't move. Didn't blink. When the surgeon finally came out, exhausted and sweating, Grandpa stood up like he was ready to take a bullet for me. "She made it through," the doctor said. "But she's not out of danger." Grandpa nodded once. "Then I'm not going anywhere." ICU felt like a different universe. Machines beeped. Tubes ran everywhere. I looked more like a ghost than a girl. Grandpa stayed in that ICU for 18 days straight. He slept in 20-minute naps. He argued with nurses. He documented every medication. He refused to leave even when security asked. "That's my girl," he said. "And I'm staying." Meanwhile, my mother never came. Not once. Not a single call. Not a single message. But she wasn't ignoring me. She was ignoring the legal papers. On day 3, the hospital filed an emergency report for medical abandonment. On day 5, my mother was served paperwork. On day 6, she yelled that she was too busy to deal with it. On day 7, she told the court she was on vacation. On day 10, the judge signed the temporary guardian order. On day 14, Grandpa signed the official documents. And on day 18, I opened my eyes. My vision was blurry. Everything hurt. My mouth tasted like metal. Someone shouted, "She's awake!" Footsteps rushed in. Machines beeped. Hands touched my shoulder gently. But the first thing I truly focused on wasn't the doctors. It was my grandpa's face, unshaven, eyes red, smiling so wide it looked painful. "Hey, baby girl," he whispered. "Welcome back." I tried to speak, nothing came out. He squeezed my hand. "I'm right here. I never left." He reached toward the foot of my bed and lifted the whiteboard clipped to the railing. I blinked. The words looked wrong. Familiar, but wrong. In thick black marker. "Legal guardian, Clarence Brooks." I stared. I blinked again. A tear slid into my ear. Grandpa wiped it with his thumb. "It's all right," he whispered. "I've got you. You're safe now." I tried to shake my head. Tried to ask where my mother was. Why she wasn't there. If she even knew I survived. Grandpa looked at me like he could read the questions behind my eyes. "She knew," he said quietly. "She just didn't come." Another tear. Another. But this time I wasn't crying because I was abandoned. I was crying because I wasn't. Because someone chose me when the person who was supposed to never even tried. Because someone signed the papers, held the vigil, stayed every minute. Because someone fought for me. And that someone wasn't my mother. It was the man who had always shown up. My grandfather. The only parent I ever really had. When I woke up, the first thing I felt was pain. Not sharp, deep, heavy, like my bones were made of glass that someone had glued together wrong. The second thing I felt was a hand holding mine. Rough, warm, familiar. Grandpa. He didn't say anything at first. He just leaned forward, placed his forehead against my hand, and let out a breath that sounded like 18 days of hell leaving his chest. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red but proud. "You did it, baby girl," he whispered. "You fought your way back." I tried to speak. Nothing came out but a raw rasp. He reached for water. A nurse rushed in. Machines started beeping faster. But I ignored all of it, because something else caught my attention, something written in bold black marker on the whiteboard by my feet. Legal guardian, Clarence Brooks. My mother's name was gone. I blinked hard, trying to understand. Why? How? She was my mother. No matter how distant she was, no matter how absent, no matter how cold. A signature like that wasn't supposed to change. Grandpa saw the confusion on my face and lowered his voice. "I didn't want you to wake up alone," he said softly. "And I wasn't about to let them risk losing you because someone else couldn't be bothered to show up." The nurses stepped out to give us a moment. Grandpa pulled his chair closer. He didn't sugarcoat anything. "Your mama refused consent," he said quietly. "She told the hospital she was busy at a spa." The memory hit me instantly. The FaceTime call. The cucumber slices. Haven laughing. My mother's voice saying, "If she doesn't pull through, let me know later." I swallowed hard. Grandpa continued. "When the hospital called her again for formal consent, she told them to let you handle it and hung up." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I didn't want to hear anymore. But Grandpa wasn't finished. The hospital filed a medical abandonment report. The judge reviewed the recording. Emergency custody was transferred. He paused. His voice broke for the first time. "I signed the papers, sweetheart. I signed because nobody else would." He wiped his cheek quickly, embarrassed at the tear. "She didn't even call to ask if you survived." My chest tightened, not from pain, but from truth. Pain I could treat. Truth? You just have to swallow that. I didn't cry. Not yet. Because a doctor walked in, clipboard in hand. "Serenity," he said gently. "We need to update you on your condition." I nodded. He listed the damage. Pelvis shattered in 3 places. Spleen ruptured. Skull fracture. 2 ribs broken. Permanent scarring. Months of rehab. Possible limp for life. Grandpa squeezed my hand every time the doctor's voice cracked. But there was something else. Something heavier than the injuries. The doctor hesitated. "And your mother was notified of the surgery outcome." I waited. "She didn't come," he finished softly. I didn't look at Grandpa. I stared at the ceiling, the fluorescent lights blurring into one long white line. I expected anger or disappointment. But what I felt was a kind of emptiness. Not dramatic, not loud. Just a quiet realization that the person I'd been calling Mom wasn't mine. Maybe never had been. When the doctor left, Grandpa finally spoke again. "I don't want to pressure you," he said softly, "but you should know. Your mother's been served." I frowned. "What do you mean?" My voice came out weak, barely a whisper. "The hospital filed a civil claim and a custody petition," Grandpa explained. She ignored both. Ignored. The word sliced, sharper than any broken bone. "She was served a second time yesterday," he continued. "Your mama didn't open the door. She pretended she wasn't home." I felt the monitors pick up my heartbeat. "Grandpa," I whispered, "she knew I was here, and she didn't come?" His jaw tightened. "She didn't even ask." Silence stretched between us. Not empty, loud. The kind of silence where you have to decide who you are after the truth hits you like a second accident. I finally asked the question I was too scared to face. "Grandpa, if you didn't sign, would I have died?" His eyes closed as if the memory physically hurt him. "Yes, sweetheart," he whispered. "You would have died on that table." My breath caught. Grandpa leaned forward, pressing his forehead to the bed. "I wasn't going to let that happen," he said, voice cracking. "Not to you. Not ever." I didn't cry then either, because shock has a way of freezing tears before they fall. The first night I was awake, Grandpa slept in the recliner beside my bed, head tilted back, mouth open, hands still holding mine even in sleep. He twitched every time a nurse walked in. He jolted upright every time I winced. He jumped whenever a monitor beeped, like he'd trained his body to protect me even while unconscious. Around midnight, a nurse whispered to me, "He hasn't left once, not even for food." I looked at him, the slouched shoulders, the unshaven jaw, the exhaustion carved into every wrinkle, and something cracked in me. Not pain, not fear. Love. A kind of love so steady and sure it made my mother's part in all this feel smaller and smaller by the minute. The next morning, Grandpa rolled his stiff shoulders and checked the board again. Guardian line, medications, vitals. He pointed at the board. "You see that name?" he asked softly. "That's not temporary. I filed the petition. You're staying with me." My throat went tight. I nodded. He patted my knee gently. "That's my girl." Later that day, I overheard two doctors whispering at the door. "Did you hear about the mom? One of the worst cases I've seen. That poor kid. At least she has the grandfather." When they saw me looking, they lowered their voices, but the damage was done. People knew. People had watched the FaceTime call. People had seen my mother refuse to come. People had heard Haven laugh. People had seen Grandpa sign like his own life depended on it. And people had judged. Hard. One nurse even asked, "Do you want us to restrict your mother from visiting?" Grandpa answered before I could. "She hasn't visited, not once. But if she ever does, she doesn't get to come in unless Serenity says so." I nodded quietly, because the idea of hearing her voice again made my stomach twist. That night, something in me finally snapped. The pain meds had worn off. The room was too quiet. The machines beeped too slowly. I stared at the door, waiting for it to open. Waiting for her. The woman who gave birth to me. The woman who should have run into the hospital screaming. The woman who should have stayed up the way Grandpa did. The woman who should have cried when she saw my injuries. Nobody came. Not even once. And that's when the tears finally fell. Silent. Warm. Endless. Grandpa woke instantly. He stood, grabbed a box of tissues, and placed his hand on my cheek. "You let it out," he whispered. "You let every bit of it out. I'm here." And for the first time since the accident, I didn't cry because I was abandoned. I cried because I wasn't. Because someone chose me. Stayed for me. Protected me. Fought for me. And that someone was the only man who had ever shown up in my life without conditions. My grandpa, my guardian, my real family. 3 days after I woke up, a man in a navy suit showed up in my ICU doorway. He carried a thick file under his arm and looked like someone who had delivered bad news to families before, but never something this twisted. He nodded at Grandpa. "Clarence," he said softly, "we need to talk." Grandpa stood up slowly, joints stiff from sleeping in a chair for weeks. He stepped into the hallway with him. I could still hear them because ICU doors never really close. "Did she respond to the petition?" "No." "Do we have the recording?" "Yes." "And the screenshots?" "All of them." Grandpa exhaled like he was holding down a storm. "Then let's proceed." When he walked back into my room, I asked the question I was scared to hear the answer to. "What petition?" He pulled his chair next to me again, voice steady, calm, protective, the way he only was when the truth would hurt. "The hospital filed a claim against your mother for medical abandonment," he said, "and I filed for emergency custody." I swallowed. "She still hasn't come?" Grandpa shook his head. "And she won't," he said. He meant it. He said it like a fact, not anger. Truth. Before I could ask more, a nurse entered. "There's someone here who wants to speak with you." My heart actually jumped. For a second, I thought maybe it was her. Maybe something inside her cracked. Maybe she realized what she did. But it wasn't her. It was the hospital administrator. He walked to the foot of my bed, glanced at my chart, then looked me straight in the eyes. "Serenity, I want to be sure you know what happened the night you arrived." Grandpa stepped closer, protective, ready to shut this down if it was too much. But I nodded. "I want to know," I whispered. The administrator set a tablet on the tray table. "This is the recording from the FaceTime consent call. Legally, as the patient, you have the right to hear it." My stomach dropped. I wasn't ready, but I needed it. He hit play. And suddenly, I was back in the trauma bay again. The image was shaky, the audio crackly. But my mother's voice? Perfectly clear. "If she doesn't pull through, just let me know. I'm not driving downtown. Call my father. He likes her more anyway." Then Haven's laugh. The screenshot sound. The snicker. My chest tightened so hard the monitors beeped. Grandpa reached for my hand, but I pulled my eyes away only when the nurse paused it. "Serenity," she said softly. "Your grandfather signed everything. He stayed. He never left." I nodded. I knew. I felt it. The administrator cleared his throat. "The judge has already reviewed this recording, and the screenshots your sister sent. The emergency hearing is tomorrow." My breath stopped. "Tomorrow?" "Yes," he said. "And you need to know. The judge is not pleased with your mother." Grandpa nodded, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jump. The administrator clicked something else on the tablet. It was a list. A list of people who had visited me. Grandpa, 67 check-ins. Nurses, 142. Physicians, 38. Physical therapy, 4. Caseworker, 2. Mother, 0. Sister, 0. Stepfather, 0. "Sometimes a visitor report says everything," the administrator said. He left us with the tablet. I stared at the blank line next to my mother's name until the words blurred. Grandpa finally spoke. "Serenity," he whispered, "I don't want you to blame yourself for her choices." I shook my head slowly. "I'm not blaming myself," I whispered. "I'm finally understanding." Grandpa's eyes softened. "You understanding what, sweetheart?" "That she never wanted me," I said quietly. "And you always did." His throat tightened. He blinked fast, fighting tears. "That's right," he said softly. "That's damn right." The next morning, they moved me from ICU to a step-down room. Still machines, still pain, but less chaos. Grandpa helped me brush my hair for the first time in weeks. He hummed the same tune he used to when I had fevers as a kid. "You ready?" he asked. I wasn't. But I nodded anyway. He held my hand as the caseworker rolled in a laptop for the court Zoom hearing. There were 3 screens. The judge, the hospital attorney, my mother. She wasn't in a courtroom, not in her home, not anywhere professional. She was sitting in her car, in a parking lot, in sunglasses. My stomach curled. She didn't look at the screen. The judge looked down at her notes. "This is the emergency custody hearing for minor Serenity Carver," she said. "Mother is present. Guardian petitioner Clarence Brooks is present. Hospital counsel is present." My mother waved like someone greeting a cashier. "Hi." The judge didn't smile. "Mrs. Carver, we have multiple claims of medical neglect, including recorded evidence. Do you have a statement before we proceed?" My mother leaned back in her seat. "I was at a spa. I told them to call my father. He handles emergencies better than I do." The judge stared at her. "That's your explanation?" "It wasn't that deep," my mother said with a shrug. "She's fine now." Grandpa made a sound, not a word, just something low and furious at the back of his throat. The judge lifted a printed transcript. "I'm going to read your words back to you," she said. "If she doesn't pull through, let me know. I'm not signing anything." My mother rolled her eyes. "Okay, yes, I said that. I was stressed. Haven was having a panic attack, and I didn't know how bad it was." The hospital attorney clicked something. A screenshot appeared on the screen. Haven's message. Finally, some peace. Picture: me on a gurney, bleeding. My stomach twisted. The judge's face hardened. "Mrs. Carver," she said slowly, "your daughter nearly died." My mother shrugged. "She didn't." The judge closed her folder. "I've heard enough." Grandpa squeezed my hand so tight I almost cried. "Effective immediately," the judge said. "Permanent, temporary guardianship is granted to Mr. Clarence Brooks." My mother's mouth fell open. "What? No, you can't do that." The judge raised her hand. "You abandoned your daughter during a life-threatening emergency. You mocked the call. You refused consent. You refused communication. You did not visit once. You are not fit to hold legal custody." My mother went silent. The judge continued. "We will have a permanent custody hearing in 90 days. Until then, you have no medical authority, no decision-making power, and no visitation rights without Serenity's consent." The screen went black. I exhaled, a long, shaking breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Grandpa kissed my forehead. "That's it, baby girl," he whispered. "You're safe now." And for the first time since the accident, I believed him. After the emergency hearing ended, the laptop screen went black, and for the first time since waking up, the hospital room felt quiet. Not peaceful. Not comforting. Quiet in the way a battlefield feels quiet after the last explosion, smoke still in the air, debris everywhere, but the danger finally gone. Grandpa sat down beside me, rubbing his palms over his knees. "I told you," he whispered. "You're safe now." I nodded. But safe didn't mean healed. The caseworker returned within minutes, holding a thick stack of papers. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "the judge wants these delivered immediately to the mother's residence." Grandpa nodded without hesitation. That meant one thing. My mother was about to be served, officially. The caseworker left, and Grandpa leaned over, brushing a loose hair off my forehead. "I'm stepping out for a couple hours," he said. "They're letting me go sign the final custody confirmations downtown. You good, baby girl?" I nodded again. He kissed the top of my head. "You call me if you need anything." And then he left, steady, determined, walking like a man who finally got to protect the person he'd been protecting in his heart for years. While Grandpa was gone, I kept replaying the hearing. My mother in her car, sunglasses on. Her shrug. Her line, "She's fine now." She said it like my survival was an inconvenience. Nurses came in and out. Doctors checked my vitals. Someone changed my bandages. But nothing cut deeper than the moment a nurse whispered, "You're lucky he stepped up." Lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt abandoned, then rescued. And those two feelings don't mix quietly. Meanwhile, across town, my mother's world was collapsing exactly the way the judge predicted. The caseworker met the court officer at my mother's front door. The officer knocked. My mother opened the door halfway, still wearing the same navy blazer from the hearing. She looked irritated. Not scared. Not ashamed. I would only learn the details later, but this is what happened next. The officer handed her the stack of legal documents. "Mrs. Carver, you've officially lost custody pending the permanent hearing. You are legally restricted from contacting Serenity without her consent." My mother's jaw dropped. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "She's my daughter." The officer didn't blink. "Not according to the court." Behind her, Haven stepped out in the hallway, holding her phone like she was about to record the whole thing for views. The officer held up a finger. "Minors involved in medical neglect are also under review." Haven froze. My mother snatched the papers with shaking hands. "This is all her fault," she hissed. "She did this to embarrass me." The officer corrected her calmly. "No, ma'am, you did this to yourself." Then he walked away, leaving her holding the consequences she never expected to face. Back in my hospital room, time moved strangely. Every minute felt both fast and slow. My body hurt in places I didn't know existed. And every breath reminded me I was alive. Because one person refused to let me die. Grandpa returned around 4:30. He pushed the door open and smiled tiredly. "All done," he said. "Judge signed everything. You're mine now." Something inside my chest softened. I didn't expect that feeling. Not relief. Not victory. Belonging. Real, solid belonging. Grandpa sat down, pulled out a styrofoam cup, and handed it to me. "Sweet tea," he said. "Doctor said you can have sips now." I laughed, the first laugh since waking up, even though it hurt. "You brought sweet tea to a hospital?" "Baby girl," he said, sliding his chair closer. "I brought sweet tea to cancer wards, hurricane shelters, and crime scenes. I'm bringing it to you." I sipped it slowly. It tasted like childhood, like porch swings, like safety. A doctor came in soon after. "Serenity, we're beginning step-down recovery. You'll start light physical therapy tomorrow." That meant pain. Real pain. But if Grandpa could sleep in a chair for 18 days, I could get through anything. He squeezed my toes gently under the blanket. "I'll be right there," he said. That night, I couldn't sleep. The Trauma Bay recording kept looping in my mind. The spa music. My mother's voice. Haven's laugh. Then the words that hurt the most. "Call my father. He likes her more anyway." Not, "I'm coming." Not, "Don't let her die." Not, "I'm her mother." Just a dismissal. A deflection. A choice. A choice to not choose me. I stared at the wall until around midnight. A nurse poked her head in. "You need anything?" "Water," I whispered. She nodded, then paused. "You know, most kids don't get someone like your grandfather." I swallowed. "I know. He fought for you," she added. "Every day." I closed my eyes as she walked out. Because she was right. He fought. My mother didn't. And that truth was quiet, heavy, and final. The next morning, Grandpa helped brush my hair again. "We'll get you strong," he said calmly. "One day at a time." Then physical therapy started. It was awful. Every movement felt like fire. Every breath felt like glass. Every step felt impossible. I cried once. Not from pain, from frustration. Grandpa handed me a tissue. "You're doing better than you think," he said. "Pain means the body's trying." I nodded. I wanted to believe him. By the afternoon, I managed to sit up on my own for 10 full seconds. The physical therapist clapped. Grandpa got misty-eyed again. "You're a warrior," he whispered. Later that evening, a hospital caseworker came in with a clipboard. "Serenity, we're moving forward with your discharge planning. Do you have a safe home to go to?" I looked at Grandpa. He straightened his shoulders. "She's coming with me." The caseworker nodded. "We've inspected your residence already. It's approved." Grandpa grinned. Of course it is. I cleaned that porch 3 times before they came. The caseworker smiled back. You ready for a new start, Serenity? I didn't hesitate. Yes, I whispered. I am. Across town, my mother was learning what consequences feel like. Her boss called her in. Her coworkers whispered. Someone had leaked the court order. Someone else leaked the FaceTime recording. Her boss told her her position at the credit union was under review. Her reputation? Gone. Shattered in the same way my bones were. At home, Haven threw a fit when her private school began asking questions. A screenshot of her finally some peace message had already made rounds. Scholarships. College recommendations. All suddenly at risk. They weren't falling apart quietly. They were falling apart publicly. And for the first time in my life, their chaos wasn't my fault. Or my responsibility. It was theirs. All theirs. Back in my hospital bed, Grandpa sat beside me as the sunset painted my room orange. You know what I told the judge today? He asked softly. I shook my head. He squeezed my hand gently. I told her you're the best damn thing I ever raised. My throat tightened. Tears finally spilled. Not sad tears. Not scared tears. Grateful ones. I love you, Grandpa, I whispered. He kissed my forehead. I love you more, baby girl. And for the first time since the accident, I believed I could survive anything. Because he was still right there, holding my hand, protecting my life, choosing me every single day. 2 days before my discharge, a nurse walked in carrying a simple blue folder. Serenity, she said softly. Your release orders were approved. I stared at the folder like it was something unreal. I'd been lying in hospital beds for so long. I forgot what outside air felt like. Forgot what sunrise looked like without fluorescent lights. Forgot who I was before the crash. Grandpa packed my things slower than usual. He kept folding and refolding the same sweatshirt until I laughed. Grandpa, I said softly, it doesn't have to be perfect. He smiled at me, that small, tired, relieved smile that held 18 days of agony behind it. Yes, it does, he whispered. Everything you get from now on has to be perfect. The nurses hugged me one by one. Some wiped their eyes. One whispered, You're the strongest kid I've ever seen. And then they wheeled me outside. The sun hit my face. Warm. Real. Not hospital lights. Not monitors. Not pain. Just life. Grandpa's truck smelled like salt, old leather, and fishing gear. Exactly the way it always had. He helped me into the passenger seat, slowly, gently, like I was made of porcelain. You ready? He asked. I nodded. He took the long way home on purpose. Down the marsh roads. Windows cracked. Sea breeze drifting in. Spanish moss swaying over the street. For the first time since the accident, I felt like I belonged somewhere again. Not in my mother's world. Not in that big house on James Island. Not in a life where I was a burden. Here. In this truck. With this man. Going to this place. Home. Grandpa's house was small. Brick. White shutters. Wind chimes hanging crooked on the porch. He carried me over the threshold. Not because I asked. Because he wanted me to enter that house like it was a new chapter, not a recovery room. The living room smelled like cedar and salt water. My bedroom was perfect. He had painted the walls pale blue, just like the hospital curtains, but softer, calmer. Mine. A clean quilt, fresh pillows, a lamp shaped like a lighthouse, and on the nightstand, a picture of me and Grandpa from when I was 8. I burst into tears. He pulled me into a gentle hug. It's okay, baby girl, he whispered. You're safe. That night, I fell asleep to the sound of waves hitting the shore outside. Not machines. Not alarms. Not fear. Waves. Recovery was brutal. Physical therapy 3 times a week. Bruises turning yellow, then purple, then fading. Pain that woke me at 2 a.m. Tears that came out of nowhere. steps that felt like mountains. Grandpa drove me to every appointment, sat in waiting rooms flipping the same 3 fishing magazines, brought me sweet tea after every session. "You're getting stronger," he'd say. I didn't believe him at first, until one afternoon, I stood without help, just for a second, just long enough for him to whisper, "There she is." Meanwhile, across town, my mother's life was falling apart piece by piece. Her boss suspended her pending review. Her neighbors whispered. Colin filed for divorce to protect his assets. Haven School started investigating her for conduct violations. Scholarships vanished. College prospects collapsed. People were seeing the FaceTime recording, hearing the audio, reading the court filings. She wasn't the victim. She was the villain. And for the first time in her life, no one was protecting her from the consequences she created. 3 months after moving in with Grandpa, the date of the permanent custody hearing arrived. I walked into the courthouse without crutches, a slight limp, a small scar on my forehead, a healed expression. Grandpa walked beside me in his Sunday suit, polished shoes, tie straight, hair combed. He looked 10 years younger, like carrying me instead of losing me finally put life back into him. We sat on the left side. My mother walked in on the right. She looked smaller, pale, hair tied back tight, clothes wrinkled, eyes empty. Haven followed behind her, quiet, withdrawn, avoiding my gaze. The judge entered. Everyone rose. My heart pounded. This was it. The judge looked at the files again, then at me, then at my grandfather. "Serenity," she said, "do you wish to testify today?" I nodded. She motioned me forward. I stood at the witness stand, palms sweating, leg trembling slightly. She asked, "How did it feel knowing your mother refused to come when the hospital said you were dying?" The courtroom held its breath. "It felt like I didn't matter," I said softly. "Like I wasn't a daughter, just an inconvenience." My mother flinched. I continued. "It felt like the last piece of hope I had for her was gone, and the only person who showed up for me was the person who always had." I looked at Grandpa. He blinked fast, once, twice, trying to hide it. The judge nodded slowly. She then turned to my mother. "Mrs. Carver, do you have anything to say on your behalf?" My mother swallowed, opened her mouth, closed it again. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't think it was that serious." Murmurs spread across the courtroom. The judge lowered her glasses, unimpressed. "That recording shows otherwise." My mother looked down, defeated. The judge lifted her final document. "In the matter of legal custody of minor Serenity Carver." My stomach tightened. She continued, "Permanent custody is hereby granted to Mr. Clarence Brooks." Grandpa squeezed my shoulder so hard I almost laughed. The judge wasn't finished. "Mrs. Carver, you are stripped of all parental rights effective immediately. Visitation and contact are at Serenity's discretion and only with her written approval." Silence. Perfect silence. Then, bang. The gavel hit. It was over. Forever. Outside the courthouse, Grandpa let out a breath so deep it sounded like he'd been holding it for 16 years. "You're mine now," he whispered, "official as the law can make it." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "I've always been yours," I murmured. He kissed my forehead. "That's right." We walked to his truck together. The sky was pink, warm, peaceful. A nurse once told me recovery isn't a straight line. It's a messy one. She was right, because life after the accident wasn't perfect. I limped for months. I had nightmares. I cried when I heard ambulance sirens. I avoided highways. But every time I broke down, Grandpa was there. "Breathe, sweetheart," he'd say. "You're okay. I've got you." And he did. Every single time. 5 years later, I'm 21. I walk without a limp. I work as a family trauma counselor, helping kids who feel unwanted, unseen, unprotected. Because I know exactly what that feels like. but I also know what it feels like to be chosen, saved, loved without conditions. Every night, I go home to the same brick house, the same porch swing, the same wind chimes. Grandpa sits on the porch with sweet tea and fishing stories. He still calls me baby girl. I still call him Grandpa. And that will never change. My mother hasn't contacted me in years, and I don't need her to, because I already have the family I deserved. The one who held my hand when I was bleeding, signed the papers that saved my life, sat beside me until my eyes opened. Family isn't who gives you life. Family is who chooses to save it.